Greetings and welcome to Voice of Sankofa, where I reveal the history that those in power don't want us to know. Today there is a significant number of ongoing armed conflicts worldwide, with some sources indicating that over 50 countries currently are engaged in war or violence. These conflicts range from the major wars like the Russian-Ukrainian War and the Israeli-Palestinian War to smaller, less publicized conflicts. Many are aware that the U.S. has a strong alliance with Israel, supplying substantial military aid, funding at least $3.3 billion in foreign military financing annually. U.S. troops are in Israel. Although the present is not a full-scale military deployment, many Americans are concerned that active involvement in the war may soon occur. As we know, conflict, violence, and holy wars have been going on for thousands of years. America, like many other countries, were conquered by invading groups waging warfare onto indigenous populations. History states that the European colonialism started in the 15th century, with the Columbus expedition fueling European imperialism around the globe. But what if I tell you all of these wars, country against country, is a distraction and in many ways are orchestrated by the people in power? I decided to investigate the alleged discovery of America, quote unquote, dating back to European invasion of 1492. And as always, I found rarely mentioned or hidden history that the powers don't want us to piece together. And as always, the more surface within these hidden stories. Mentioning this group is just me reporting the facts. This is a very telling video, so stay tuned as I reveal the great deception of the world powers, as well as reveal the Moors' active involvement in European colonialism. All world governments are related directly or indirectly. And when I say related, I mean two things. One, many are bloodline related. Two, world governments are interwoven together, working towards the same or similar goals. Also, where there is not a direct bloodline connection to the papacy, there stands a de facto government in place, which I'll discuss later. Though they fight amongst each other, which in many cases is staged, they are still fighting for the same team, running world government in accordance with their Anunnaki overlords, their designation of God, all of which has extended from ancient Kemet and Egypt with serpent deity worship. I will not get deep into this topic because I've already discussed this in previous videos that you can check out. The Vatican heads the world governments regardless of religion. All the world is a stage and we're their players. Here's a popular map made in the 16th century entitled Europa Regina, meaning Queen Europe. This map depicted the European continent as a queen. European regions forming a female human shape, with Spain as the head or crown, a scepter in the left hand, and globus cruciger in the right. This map shows the interconnectedness of the various European monarchies or empires and their role in the House of Habsburg, one of the most powerful families in the history of Europe and Western civilization in the 1500s. The Habsburgs were best known for ruling many countries throughout Europe during the Middle Ages and early modern period, including the Holy Roman Empire and Spain. The Habsburg dynasty and the Vatican papacy were closely intertwined, particularly due to the Habsburgs' strong Catholic identity and their role as Holy Roman emperors. This period saw the Habsburg actively supporting the Catholic Church in their efforts to combat the Protestant Reformation, with the Habsburg often acting as champions of the papacy. The Habsburgs, particularly Charles V and his son Philip II, saw the papacy as a crucial ally in maintaining their power and influence in Europe. The Pope endorsed Spain and Portugal to head worldwide colonization under this dynasty for the benefit of the Vatican's wealth and growing empire. The papacy was actively involved in European colonization and slavery, religiously and politically endorsing war efforts to exterminate populations for their land and resources, also justifying or facilitating the enslavement of non-Christians, which would have been some of our ancestors. Popes as well as Catholic clergies owned slaves as well. So as you can see, all of these European countries were under the same umbrella, the same European family, and this is the illusion of separation. The Age of Discovery, also known as the Age of Exploration, was part of the early modern period and overlapped with the Age of Sail. It was a period from approximately the 15th to the 17th century, during which seafarers from European countries explored, colonized, and conquered regions across the planet. And listen closely to these sentences. The Age of Discovery was a transformative period when previously isolated parts of the world became connected to form the world system and lay the groundwork for globalization. The extensive overseas exploration, particularly the opening of maritime routes to the East Indies and European colonization of the Americas by the Spanish and Portuguese, later joined by the English, French, and Dutch. This spurred international global trade. The interconnected global economy of today's 21st century has its origins in the expansion of trade networks during this era. The exploration created colonial empires and marked an increased adoption of colonialism as a government policy in several European states. Having set human history on the global common course, the legacy of the age still shapes the world today, some 500 years later. Ask yourself, who would have the money to buy or build ships, have enough food and other resources to navigate the seas to seek isolated parts of the world? The answer is wealthy people. Wealthy people from various families came together to develop the worldwide system of globalization, which is the process of increasing interdependence and integration among the economies, markets, societies, and cultures of different countries worldwide. According to this passage, the wealthy monarchs or elite family of Spain and Portugal were the first European countries of exploration, colonizing the Americas, followed by the elite families of England, France, and the Netherlands. And in conjunction, these countries are responsible for shaping our worldwide market today, a market that has contributed to global suffering. Within the North American history books, the story of Christopher Columbus goes that he went on a voyage sponsored by the Crown of Castile of Spain, looking for India. However, went the wrong direction and instead, quote unquote, discovered the West Indies and the Americas between 1492 and 1504. By now, many of us are aware he did not discover America. He was simply claiming this land for the Spanish Empire. And here is some hidden history about Columbus. I read that Columbus was of Moorish heritage, and he was also accompanied by a Moorish sea navigator in his first expedition. There were two primary waves of European colonization. The first wave occurred in the 15th century, and the second wave occurred in the 19th century, with a focus on Africa. The second wave, often called the Scramble for Africa, saw European powers partition and colonize much of the African continent. Though in the second wave of European colonization, the focus was on Africa, the Portuguese already had colonies set in Africa and China and had dominance in the trade routes to Africa. The role of the church in European colonization, and be sure to listen closely to this history. Religious zeal played a large role in Spanish and Portuguese overseas activities, while the Pope himself was a political power to be heeded, as evidenced by the Pope's authority to command whole continents open to colonization by particular kings. The church also sent missionaries to convert the indigenous peoples of other continents to the Catholic faith. Thus, the 1455 papal bull Romanus Pontifex granted the Portuguese all lands behind Cape Bojador and allowed them to reduce pagans and other enemies of Christ to perpetual slavery. Now I'll read the fourth paragraph. Spanish treatment of the indigenous populations provoked a fierce debate at home in 1550 and 51, dubbed the Valladolid debate, over whether Indians possessed souls, and if so, whether they were entitled to the basic rights of mankind. Bartolomé de las Casas, author of a short account of the destruction of the Indies, championed the cause of the natives and was opposed who claimed American Indians were natural slaves. Did you grasp the message in this passage? The Pope is equivalent to a country's president who gave orders to certain kings to colonize entire continents, as well as writing decrees or letters that condemned non Christians to be perpetual slaves. The Pope. He divided new colonized lands between Spain and Portugal. This source reveals the history and true intentions of the Vatican and their active involvement in European colonization, expanding the European Empire. All of this in the name of their God. I want people to understand that God is a being that can have multiple identities. It doesn't necessarily mean one is speaking of the Most High Supreme Being. Here's a rarely discussed topic from Wikipedia discussing the civilizing mission, a movement spearheaded by European countries. Quote, the civilizing mission is a political rationale for military intervention and for colonization, aiming to facilitate the cultural assimilation of indigenous peoples, especially in the period from the 15th to the 20th centuries. The Western colonial powers claimed that, as Christian nations, they were duty-bound to distribute Western civilization to what they perceived as heathen, primitive cultures. Europe colonists saw non-Europeans as backward nations, as people intrinsically incapable of socioeconomic progress. The economic self-development of a non-European people is incompatible with retaining their own culture, their morals, traditions, and customs. That breaking indigenous people from their old culture is a prerequisite to socioeconomic progress by way of practical revolutions in the social, cultural, and religious institutions, which would change their collective psychology and mental attitude, philosophy, and way of life, or to disappear. End quote. So to sum up, the religious conversion of indigenous people into Christianity was nothing more than a mere European strategy to successfully colonize indigenous populations for their resources and land. Here's a simple explanation of the Vatican's role in government, and this is the case for all converts into the Abrahamic religious structure. How a body of people, the elites, can control entire populations by influencing their beliefs in God, a very clever trick. It was a particular bloodline that started the Abrahamic religion thousands of years ago. Everyone's worldview of creation and the Creator wasn't the same until the people who spread their sinister religion got millions, if not billions, of people on board with believing their narrative of God as being the true story of the Most High Supreme God. This was how invading elites control people through psychological weaponry, and it's still working today. To the left is the Spanish and Portuguese empires circa 1790, and to the right is the United States split by the English, French, and Spanish colony at the beginning of the French and Indian War that started in 1754. Now the caveat is at this time France was being ruled by Spain under the House of Habsburg. So in essence, the French territory was Spanish, as reflected by the map to the left. The blue color indicates Spanish colonies, and the green indicates Portuguese colonies. The Portuguese had more colonies in Africa, India, and China. In our American history books, I rarely recall discussions about Portugal's role in the colonization of the Americas, only Great Britain and Spain's role. So I investigated Portugal's colonization in the Western Hemisphere, and as always, I found hidden and omitted history left out of our school's textbooks. European oceanic exploration started with the maritime expeditions of Portugal to the Canary Islands in 1336, and with the Portuguese discovery of the Atlantic archipelagos of Madeira and Azores, the coast of West Africa in 1434, and the establishment of the sea route to India in 1498 by Vasco da Gama, which initiated the Portuguese maritime and trade presence in Kerala and the Indian Ocean. In 1492, the Catholic monarchs of Spain funded Italian mariner Christopher Columbus, planned to sail west to reach the Indies by crossing the Atlantic. Columbus encountered a continent uncharted by Europeans. Later, it was called America after Amerigo Vespucci, a trader working for Portugal. Portugal quickly claimed those lands, Canary Islands, under the terms of the Treaty of Alcacoves, but Castile, Spain, was able to persuade the Pope, who was Castilian, to issue 4 papal bulls to divide the world into 2 regions of exploration, where each kingdom had exclusive rights to claim newly discovered lands. These were modified by the Treaty of Tordesillas, ratified by Pope Julius II. Though Portugal and Spain were in competition in fights for colonies, there were Italians working for the Spaniards, Spaniards working for the Portuguese, Portuguese working for the Spaniards, and all countries working for the Pope. This is the illusion of separation. Papal bulls, an official letter by the Catholic Church authorized by the Pope. The majority of the great bulls now in existence are in the nature of confirmations of property or charters of protection accorded to the monasteries and religious institutions. As stated previously, the Vatican was the political power in European colonization, and today, the Vatican is secretly involved in the powers worldwide. History rarely changes, it's just hidden in most cases. Have you ever wondered why most countries televise what's happening in the Vatican? Well, now you understand why. The Treaty of Alcacoves mentioned in the previous slide was the first document to define the field reserved for the future discoveries of Spain and Portugal, specifically delineating the respective rights of the 2 crowns over the territories of the African continent and the Atlantic islands. In this way, it can be considered a landmark in the history of colonialism. It is one of the first international documents formally outlining the principle that European powers are empowered to divide the rest of the world into spheres of influence and colonize the territories located within such spheres, and that any indigenous peoples living there need not be asked for consent. This remained a generally accepted principle in the ideology and practice of European powers up to the 20th century decolonization. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas divided the world between Portugal and Spain. Portugal gained control over Africa, Asia, and Eastern South America, encompassing everything outside Europe east of a line drawn 370 leagues west of Cape Verde Islands. The Spanish received everything west of this line, including the islands discovered by Columbus on his first voyage. The dividing line, situated about halfway between Portuguese Cape Verde and Spanish discoveries in the Caribbean, split the known world of Atlantic islands evenly. So, there was no consideration of the indigenous people who were already living in these areas, splitting up the world with no regard for the life of others. These groups are truly parasitic people. I'll read from this passage highlighting vital sections. Pay close attention to these details because I will build upon the Portuguese later, revealing their identity and involvement in American colonialism. This section is a continuation of the Age of Discovery, and it states, in 1415, North Africa was conquered by the Portuguese, aiming to control navigation of the African coast. Young Prince Henry the Navigator, a Portuguese explorer, became aware of profit possibilities in the trans-Saharan trade routes. For centuries, slave and gold trade routes linking West Africa with the Mediterranean passed over the Western Sahara Desert, controlled by the Moors. In 1492, the joint rulers Isabella and Ferdinand conquered the Moorish kingdom of Granada, which had been providing Castile with African goods through payment, and decided to fund Christopher Columbus' expedition in the hopes of bypassing Portugal's monopoly on West African sea routes to reach the Indies by traveling west. From 1495, the French, English, and Dutch entered the race of exploration after learning of Columbus's exploits, defying the Iberian monopoly on maritime trade by searching for new routes. The Strait of Gibraltar was Muslim control of territory, including the Iberian Peninsula, as well as the trade monopolies of Christian city-states in Italy. Now, the Ottoman Empire was active at this time from 1299 to 1922, when Portuguese and Spanish colonization was taking place, as well as the existence of the Holy Roman Empire, which are the areas of Germany and France from 962 to 1806, the Byzantine Empire, which is the Eastern Roman Empire from 330 to 1453, and the Tattaria Empire, which was active from the 13th to 19th centuries. So this left me wondering, who was the true starter of European colonialism if there were established empires whose existence overlapped with the 15th century European age of discovery? Of course, with this awareness, it's impossible to believe that America was an unexplored landmass before the arrival of Columbus, which of course has been disproven many of times. So what are they hiding? For the elites and governments to start the story of America at 1492 with Christopher Columbus. Soon you'll see why this elaborate cover-up of the truth of United States. The global impact of European colonialism. European overseas expansion led to contact between the old and new worlds, producing the Columbian Exchange. Europeans brought cattle, horses, and sheep to the New World, and from the New World, Europeans received tobacco, potatoes, tomatoes, and maize. Other items and commodities becoming important in global trade were the tobacco, sugarcane, and cotton crops of the Americas, along with, and listen to this, gold and silver brought from the American continent not only to Europe, but elsewhere in the Old World. The intentions of colonialism. From its very outset, Western colonialism was operated as a joint public-private venture, meaning business. Columbus' voyages to the Americas was partially funded by Italian investors, but whereas the Spanish state maintained a tight rein on trade with its colonies, by law, the colonies could only trade with one designated port in the mother country, and treasure was brought back in special convoys. The English, French, and Dutch granted what were effectively trade monopolies to joint stock companies, such as the East India Companies and the Hudson Bay Company. Therefore, all European powers, regardless of country loyalty, all worked together for global commercialization of products and services. Socioeconomic gains for the wealthy only. Again, all of these wars that are being fought are orchestrated by elite families. The global impact on indigenous population states, and I'll mention the vital sections. The formation of new transoceanic links and expansion of European influence led to the Age of Imperialism, which began during the Age of Discovery, during which colonial powers from Europe colonized most territory on the planet. European colonial powers conquered and colonized numerous indigenous nations and cultures and conducted numerous conversions and attempts at a cultural assimilation, both voluntary or forced. Combined with the introduction of infectious diseases from Europe, these events led to a drastic decrease of the indigenous American population. In some areas like North America, Central America, Australia, New Zealand, and Argentina, indigenous peoples were badly treated, driven off their lands, and reduced to dependent minorities in the territory. After the Age of Discovery came the Age of Imperialism, a shift from colonialism to imperialism. Within the rise of the Industrial Revolution, trading shifted from an agriculture and home economy to an economy dominated by industry and machine manufacturing. These technological changes introduced new ways of working and living and fundamentally transformed society. In imperialism, the industrializing nations increasingly became sellers in search of markets for the growing volume of their machine-produced goods. With advance of industrialization, there was a rising demand for raw materials for industry, hence stealing resources from indigenous lands and the indigenous never receiving a profit. The urgency to create markets and the constant pressure for new materials and food were eventually reflected in colonial practices, which sought to adapt the colonial areas to the prioritizing the industrializing nations. Such adoption involved major disruptions of existing social systems over wide areas on the planet. Now, hear this from this passage. The social systems of indigenous populations over most of the earth outside of Europe nevertheless remain much the same as they had been for centuries, in some places for millennia. These societies there were largely self-sufficient small communities based on agriculture and home industry, providing poor markets for the mass-produced goods flowing from the factories of the technologically advancing countries. Nor were the existing social systems flexible enough to introduce and rapidly expand the commercial agriculture required to supply the food and raw materials needed for the empire builders. Next paragraph. The adaptation of the non-industrialized parts of the world to become more profitable territories of the industrializing nations embraced, among other things, overhaul of existing land and property arrangements, including the introduction of private property in land where it did not previously exist, as well as the expropriation, known today as eminent domain, of land for use by white settlers or for plantation agriculture. Creation of a labor supply for commercial agriculture and mining by means of direct forced labor and indirect measures aimed at generating a body of wage-seeking laborers. Spread of the use of money and exchange of commodities by imposing money payments for taxes and land, rent, and by inducing a decline of home industry. And where the pre-colonial society already had a developed industry, curtailment of production and exports by native producers. All this to say that we have to willingly participate in their industries and markets in order for the wealthy to make a profit and have wealth. Before their presence, indigenous people were already self-sufficient. So absorb what I'm saying. The elites need us, we don't need them. And this is what they don't want us to wake up to. They have created this false belief and an abusive reliance on their industries and markets through tactics of indoctrination, manipulation, force, and violence. Here's an inside look into the worldwide system of capitalism. To make everything I've introduced thus far come full circle, I'll delve deeper into the House of Habsburg and two other dynastic families because of their suggested ties to a significant biblical bloodline, and I guarantee it's not as you think. As mentioned earlier, this family is one of the most wealthy and powerful European families that ruled many countries throughout Europe during the Middle Ages and early modern period, including the Holy Roman Empire and Spain. New Spain was a vast Spanish colonial territory, and its jurisdiction comprised a large area of the southern and western portions of North America, mainly what became Mexico and the southwestern United States, but also California, Florida, and Louisiana, Central America as Mexico, the Caribbean like Hispaniola and Martinica, and northern parts of South America, even Colombia. Several Pacific archipelagos, including the Philippines and Guam, additional Asian colonies as the island of Taiwan. New Spain's capital was in Mexico City. Silver mining became a major source of wealth for the Spanish Empire. Charles V of Spain was the first king of Spain under the House of Habsburg. He was the heir to the rising House of Habsburg, which he assumed the throne after the death of his grandfather, Ferdinand II of Spain. Charles was a Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, and Lord of the Netherlands while alive. In the Americas, Charles oversaw the continuation of Spanish colonization and a short-lived German colonization. The personal union of the European and American territories he ruled was the first collection of realms labeled the empire on which the sun never sets. The Habsburg dynasty achieves its highest position when Charles was elected Holy Roman Emperor in 1519. Much of Charles' reign was dedicated to the fight against Protestantism, which led to its eradication throughout vast areas under Habsburg control. The Spanish Habsburgs also ruled Portugal from 1580 to 1640, a union of the crowns. Here's the illusion of separation amongst European countries ruled by the same families. And here's some more information. His grandparents, King and Queen of Spain, Isabella and Ferdinand, of the Columbus expeditions, were second cousins. Their marriage was considered a political alliance that united kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. European dynasties were widely known to practice inbreeding. Therefore, they are all related in some way. To the right are two coats of arms. The first one is Charles V as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and the second one is the House of Habsburg, Spain. Coat of arms of a family is a special designation in the form of a shield that they use as a symbol of their identity. On the first coat of arms, the House of Habsburg crest is superimposed on the double-headed black eagle. Pay attention to these crests and remember the black eagle and the fleur-de-lis symbols. The fleur-de-lis represents the French dynasty, a symbol present throughout New Orleans. The throne of the Holy Roman Empire was continuously occupied by the Habsburgs from 1440 until their extinction in the male line in 1740, and as the Habsburgs Lorraines from 1765 until its dissolution in 1806. Listed are all the countries that had kings from the same family. This passage further states that the family split several times into parallel branches, most consequentially in the mid-16th century between its Spanish and German-Austrian branches, following the resignation of Emperor Charles V in 1556. Although they ruled distinct territories, the different branches nevertheless maintained close relations and frequently intermarried. And here's some more from Wiki. Spain amassed large quantities of gold and silver from the New World. In the 1540s, large-scale extraction of silver from Mexico began. During the 16th century, Spain held the equivalent of US $1.5 trillion in 1990 terms in gold and silver from the New Spain, which was America. Being the most powerful European monarch at a time full of war and religious conflicts, the Habsburg rulers spent their wealth in wars and arts across Europe. Now, did you know in 1492, under the Catholic monarchs Isabella and Ferdinand, the Castilian language was carried to the Americas in the 16th century by the conquistadors, who are the colonizers, because of Castilian's importance in these lands ruled by the Spanish crown. Today, Castilian is known as the Spanish language. The Merovingian dynasty is a Frankish dynasty that ruled in Europe before the House of Habsburg and was established from 481 to 751 CE. The Merovingians ruled the Frankish kingdoms and are considered the first kings of France. This dynasty shaped the political landscape of Europe in the early Middle Ages. The Merovingian family controlled vast wealth and amassed wealth through conquest and the imposition of fines. The Frankish kingdom became a powerful center of Christianity in Western Europe, and the Merovingian kings played a crucial role in the spread of Catholicism. Clovis I was the founder of the Merovingian dynasty, as well as the first king of the Franks to unite all the Franks under one ruler. Under Clovis I, who reigned from 481 to 511, the Franks converted to Roman Catholicism. Through him, Rome began to establish undisputed supremacy in Western Europe. Its declared objective is the restoration of this dynasty and bloodline to the throne not only of France, but of other European nations as well. A restoration that is sanctioned and justifiable, both legally and morally. Interestingly enough, the name Merovingians show up in the movie The Matrix as being the bad guys trying to stop the awakening of Neo from exposing the lies of the Matrix. And this is not a coincidence, but a soft disclosure by Hollywood or our government on which bloodline is central in controlling this matrix. What I'm about to read comes from sources with conflicting narratives, however, worth mentioning, because they are linking the Merovingians to the Israelites from the Davidic line. One source states, quote, "The claim that the Merovingian dynasty is descended from the Davidic line is a popular theory, particularly related to the writings of various authors in The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. It suggests that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had children and their descendants intermarried with the Merovingian dynasty in France, potentially leading to secret societies like the Priory of Sion." Another source states, "The Merovingian bloodline and its offshoots includes a long line of pharaohs in ancient Egypt, including Ramses II in 1200 BC, who is considered to be the greatest pharaoh of all. The gold mines of Nubia made him rich beyond the imagination." This dynasty has a connection to the House of Habsburg, and listen to this. Otto von Habsburg was the last crown prince of Austria-Hungary from 1916 to 1918, and he was titled King of Jerusalem. To the right is the coat of arms for this dynasty. Again, remember these symbols as I'll demonstrate something in coming slides. The B on the Merovingian coat of arms transformed into the fleur de lis, again, the popular symbol that's seen throughout New Orleans, Louisiana. The book entitled History of the Habsburgs Empire suggests a genetic connection between the Habsburgs and the Merovingian dynasty. All illusions that empires are separated. Wealth is transferred into hands of the same stock of people who start new dynasties and empires after old ones fall. It's not surprising at all this book, as well as other internet sources, states these connections as theories or legends. How is it that the elite's family history seemed to be such a mystery? Because they hide the truth. Did you know the term conspiracy theory, a term created by the elites, was to create confusion and mislead people from knowing the truth? This is why it's imperative for us to do our own research, finding the pieces and putting them together. The elites make careful and calculated decisions regarding their unrighteous leadership and who gets to control the trillions of dollars that circulate between them. Think of them as a well-organized mob. And these people in power are connected to the bloodline of the Bible. Feudalism in medieval Europe was a strict societal hierarchy, with the king at the top, followed by nobles, knights, and peasants. Feudalism limited social mobility and often led to the exploitation of peasants. It also created a rigid social structure with limited opportunities for advancement. It directly influences how wealth is distributed within a society. Attaining wealth is not determined by merit or hard work, but by social standing. Feudalism endorses elitist society similar to our country today. Under the Merovingian dynasty, the Carolingian family obtained the office of mayor of the Merovingian palace. As the authority of the Merovingian rulers gradually slipped from them, power became increasingly concentrated in the hand of the mayors, so much so that the Carolingians were the ones who were effectively ruling the kingdom. Charlemagne ruled as king of the Franks from 768 AD and expanded his kingdom through military conquests. In 800 AD, the Pope crowned Charlemagne as emperor of the Romans, creating the Carolingian Empire, which was the largest European political entity until the 1800s. This dynasty played a crucial role in shaping the political landscape of Europe, laying the foundations for the Holy Roman Empire and influencing the development of modern France and Germany. Within the three families, the House of Habsburg, the Merovingian dynasty, and the Carolingian dynasty, all share similar loyalties to the Catholic Church and spread of Christianity, as well as their influence in the political landscape of Europe. Look at their coat of arms, half of the black eagle and the fleur de lis. Here are the symbols of the black eagle and the fleur de lis on each family's coat of arms. The black eagle in particular is on 3 of the 4 coat of arms. And this is one of the great world deceptions. Confirmation that the same family split into different dynasties over different time periods, what they don't want us to pay attention to, as well as the hidden history that these families tie back to the Israelites of the Bible. As stated before, what is being witnessed today is infighting or orchestrated chaos in the form of war. All have the same agenda of world domination over Earth's citizens to support their very lucrative empires. And this is not only about Europe, but this has been a worldwide effort by countries on every continent with the same agenda. Here is another source I found stating, quote, "The Habsburgs are related through marriage with the Merovingians, who are said to have descended from the tribe of Benjamin or tribe of Dan, who went into exile following war with the other 11 tribes. The immediate forebears of the Merovingians, who were ultimately a Semitic or Israelite origin and descendants of King Saul. Early in the 5th century, the Merovingians established themselves in what is now Belgium and northern France. There they adopted the Kabbalistic pseudo-Christianity of the Cathars, a dualistic religion that holds there are 2 eternal gods, the God of good and the God of evil. It is revealing that these Luciferian beliefs is held by those who would be masters of this world today, and who claim that Lucifer will ultimately be victorious. There is strong evidence to suggest that this Jewish order, the Priory of Sion, was the author of Freemasonry and the protocols of the learned elders of Sion, as well as the Rosicrucian. There is no question that numerous quatrains which refer to the advent of Le Grand Monarch indicate that these sovereigns will ultimately derive from the Merovingian dynasty, end quote. Here it says, one empire under God, one rule under Christ, one wreck for all time. The English translation of the Latin words on the bottom states, Christ conquers, Christ reigns, Christ commands. Many followers of religion have difficulty receiving this knowledge because having been indoctrinated to believe in it. These are the multiple families responsible for the spread of the Holy Bible throughout the world by their colonization efforts. All of these families fall under the Black Eagle bird of nobility of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was located in Western and Central Europe and included parts of what is now France, Germany, and Italy. This next slide is about to reveal the shocking truth of the identity of these European colonizing families. I came across a document that was written by a person who identifies themselves from the bloodline of the Nubians of Nubia and Egypt and calls themselves an Olmec Nubian. The author discloses the hidden past of the Nubians, who are the Black Afro-Asiatic people of the Bible. As always, do your own research, but I found that this author narrative fills the gaps of knowledge that has been intentionally hidden from our history books. From this passage, it states, quote, "It has been said that Joe L. Rogers found more than 500 images of Black noble families in Europe. Just imagine 500 Black nobility family crests that are purposely being hidden from the public to conceal the truth. This leaves another tremendous problem for them, because this is in Europe, not Africa. These are all Black nobles who were there before the so-called white Black nobles coat of arms, which are registered in Europe as royal families. Moorish nobility and Black nobility is the same thing. The original black eagle bird of nobility is where many of the secrets came from concerning many of the secret societies of today. There are many golden cities of hidden treasures and secrets which were left by our ancestors many hundreds of thousands of years ago. End quote. Here the author presents many revelations. The author admits that European white nobles, presently or in the past, are actually white black nobles who are the albinoid offsprings of the Moors after generations removed from having a dark phenotype. What we've been taught to refer as white people are actually albinos, people devoid of melanin. Moors were the Christian crusaders, the oppressive elites, and the conquistadors who killed millions of people in the name of Christianity to gain access to the land and resources of the indigenous. So if you want to know who has all of our ancestors' heirlooms and gold, the European Moorish dynasty have it. Ask yourself this: who are the real ones responsible for rewriting and covering up history? The author says more, and listen to this, quote, "Black nobility is something that was started by indigenous black nobles, prophets, and priestesses, who were the original rulers of the planet Earth, master masons who built pyramids, temples, and mounds for spiritual purposes. The dragon blood or gene was originally our family because it was the first form of evolution on this planet, which was passed down through the Olmecs. The same structure found in Egypt with the double crown of Lower Egypt with the black noble black bird and serpent is a sacred symbol, and in the Olmec structure as well. Yemisi kings can be also found in the National Archives of London. As you can see, even in the South Carolina Department of Archives and the London Archives have an Olmec Nubians family on record as kings before they began calling them chiefs from England." End quote. For those who are unaware, the Olmecs are serpent kings worshipped in Nubia and Mesoamerica. So here's the breakdown. The Moors under the Yemisi tribes, who are the American Washita Indians, who according to the author's narrative were in North America first, migrated east, and then colonized Europe and were documented as European kings in the books. The Moors are the Muslims and Christians by birthright, meaning they are the designated group to receive the inheritance of Abraham, according to their man-made biblical scriptures. They are responsible for the spread of all Abrahamic religions, which is rooted in Babylonian mythology. Babylonians who worship serpentine gods called the Anunnaki or Olmecs, and participated in Chaldean demonology, which is the study of demons. Catholicism, the first sect of Christianity, itself is the religion of the satanic practices of the Dogons, a Moorish tribe from Mali, West Africa. The Moors are the fathers of the original corrupted Vatican, Europeans who colonized the world. The title European has been distorted. European doesn't mean white, just like American doesn't mean white. European is someone from Europe. Our understanding of European today was an intentional semantic change. Here's some information I found. Quote, "The Committee of 300 now call themselves World Government Founders for the NWO, New World Order, a reference no doubt to their hereditary claim to the divine right of kings. It is imperative that we realize that privately, the black nobility refuse to ever recognize any government other than their own inherited and divine right to rule. They believe the United States still belongs to England and work diligently behind the scenes to cause conditions whereby they may regain their crowns." End quote. Nothing has been stolen by other groups as commonly stated by the Moors. The white people are but a mere cover-up for the atrocities and corruption that the Moors are doing in the world today, who work behind the scenes of the so-called white government worldwide. Oppressing the aboriginal black persons on earth has been at the hands of the Moors. These are alleged illustrations depicting Moorish Catholic popes. The Vatican are still Moors hidden behind the scenes today. Moors identify as Moabites in the Bible, a Hamitic group. Please don't be fooled that there is a difference between the black Moorish nobility and an everyday Moor. These people, regardless of social standing, live by the same code of dominance, ruthlessness, and trickery. All Moors were not expelled from Spain in 1492. These were religious political wars between the Jews, Muslims, and Catholics, not the propagandized race or skin color wars that has been taught. Again, the Moors did a reset in the 18 and 1900s and changed the narrative of humanity. Warlocks using witchcraft and technology. New Spain, which are various Spanish colonies, had a complex, rigid social hierarchy, with peninsulares, who are Spanish colonists, having the highest social standing, followed by criollos, who are individuals of Spanish descent born into a Spanish colony in the Americas, the first generation born outside of Spain. Criollos in English translates to Creoles, and I'll explain the misconception of Creole in the next slide. These social classes are referencing the hierarchy amongst the melanated Moors in their colonies. Next are the insulares, and was a term specifically used for Spanish Filipinos of Spanish descent, born in the Philippines. In essence, they were the Creoles of the Spanish colonial world in the Philippines and the Spanish East Indies. The Philippines were colonized by the Spanish for 300 years, from 1565 to 1898. Next, there were the mestizos, who are individuals of mixed European and indigenous American persons on the Spanish colony. Mulattoes, individuals of mixed European and African ancestry, occupied a lower social status and faced discrimination and limited opportunities. Mulattoes are followed by Native Americans and African slaves as the class oppressed by the upper class, with the enslaved considered as property. The social hierarchies that we live in today were introduced into our societies by the Moors. This is what have been used to maintain control over diverse populations by creating division that prevented unified resistance against their colonial rule. The Creole narrative has changed over time, and I conclude this is connected to an agenda of hiding the truth of who the real oppressors were and still are. This information before you comes from Wikipedia. Creoles were planters, poor whites, and free people of color. The largest and wealthiest group, free-born blacks and mulattoes. Saint Domingue is known today as Haiti. Saint Domingue Creoles were the people who lived in the French colony of Saint Domingue prior to the Haitian Revolution. These Creoles formed an ethnic group native to Saint Domingue and were all born in the island. The Creoles were well educated and they created much art, such as the famed French opera. Their society prized manners, good education, tradition, and honor. As the colony Haiti developed, a planter class emerged that created highly profitable plantations. These plantations generated so much wealth that Haiti soon became the richest colony in the world. By 1789, Saint Domingue was made up of about 8,000 plantations. Between 1681 and 1791, the labor for these plantations was provided by an estimated 790,000 or 860,000 slaves, accounting in 1783 through 1791 for a third of the entire Atlantic slave trade. During and after the Haitian Revolution, many Creoles from Haiti fled to locations in the United States, other Antilles Islands, New York City, Cuba, France, Jamaica, and especially New Orleans and Louisiana, where they made an enormous impact on Louisiana Creole culture. Creoles were not slaves but would have been indentured servants, meaning hired help under contract. They were the slave owning class. Here's more from Wikipedia. Quote, the free people of color class was made up of ex-slaves, free-born blacks, and mixed-race people, and they controlled much wealth and land in the same way as whites. They held full citizenship and civil equality with other French subjects. And listen to this. Race was initially tied to culture and class, and some white Creoles had non-white ancestry. This passage then goes on to say, quote, although the Creoles of color and ex-slaves, which is really indentured servants, held considerable power, they eventually became the subject of racism and a system of segregation due to the introduction of diversionist policies by the royal government, as the Bourbon regime feared the united power of the Creoles. Starting in the early 1760s, the Bourbon royalist authorities began attempting to cut Creoles of color out of Haitian society, banning them from working in positions of public trust or as respected professionals. They were made subject to discriminatory colonial legislation. Statutes forbade Creoles of color for taking up certain professions, wearing European clothing, carrying swords or firearms in public, or attending social functions where whites were present. The regulations did not restrict their purchase of land, and many had already accumulated substantial holdings and became slave owners. By 1789, they owned 1/3 of the plantation property and 1/4 of the slaves of Saint Domingue. End quote. So basically, this is saying that the Spanish royalists were frightened that the Creoles would collectively dominate in wealth. So they began to sanction them with rules and restrictions to eliminate this threat. The Haitian Revolution was a revolt of the Creoles against the Peninsulares, restrictions that they had, and it had nothing to do with slavery. This is a false narrative. Worldwide conflicts revolve around wealth, not morality. When Creoles left Haiti during and after the Haitian Revolution, many fled, bringing their slaves with them. These are pictures of melanated French Creoles, who are also known as the French Acadians, who are the descendants of the Acadians in ancient Mesopotamia. Acadians are the people, and get this, of the Akan tribe of West Africa. Very surprising. Initially, these Haitian plantations were operated with the labor of indentured servants from Europe, but they were eventually supplanted by enslaved Africans brought to the Americas via the Atlantic slave trade. Most African slaves brought to the Americas were sold to the planter class, who frequently subjected them to brutal mistreatment. Beginning in the mid-18th century, the rise of abolitionism in Europe and the Americas led to a popular movement to abolish slavery in European colonies, which met with a strong resistance from the planter class. By the 20th century, the planter class ceased to be politically and socially influential in either the Americas or Europe. And listen closely to this sentence. The exact reasons for the decline of the planter class and their role in the development of racial capitalism remain a strong point of contention amongst historians. Racial capitalism is defined as a concept that explains how capital accumulation within capitalism in certain societies is achieved through the extraction of social and economic value from people of marginalized racial identities, particularly BIPOC communities. Did you hear this message? These people of Moorish heritage developed racial capitalism. Between 1791 and 1810, thousands of Saint Dominican refugees from the Haitian Revolution, both whites and free people of color, arrived in New Orleans. A number brought their slaves with them, many of whom were native Africans or of full blood descent. Now I'll reveal some hidden history about the United States government. In the game that the powers play with the citizens, who cares what these terms mean? They're all man made ideologies anyway, created by people who want to control wealth and create division amongst people for their benefit. Many people participate in their fights, which absolutely has nothing to do with us. Fighting wars that creates death and destruction and more wealth for the elites. Let's say a country wins the war. How does this benefit the citizens? Prices go up in wartime because we are paying for the war. Politics serves the wealthy and sociopolitically controls the citizens. In the system of American corporate feudalism, American citizens are at the bottom of the social class. So politically, what are people really fighting towards? A de jure government is a government that is legally established and recognized under the laws of a country or state. It's the government that has the legal authority to govern, as opposed to the de facto government, which might exist in practice but doesn't have legal legitimacy. George Washington marked the beginning of the de facto government in the United States when he took presidential office in 1789. So then, who is the United States de jure government? I won't read everything, I'll just skip around. And it says, this is not a reference to the US, but the last Western Empire de jure government, prior to this one de facto government, who stated it is properly the successor of the consular courts. The Supreme Court has said that the de jure government offices still exist, but the people have failed to occupy them. The last of the United States consular courts, parentheses Morocco, was abolished in 1956. Latin author C.C. Marquez gives us a portion of the secret. Also, America was also a Negro continent, and that the Ottoman/Olmecans of Mexico are the remains of the Aboriginal Negro race. Therefore, obviously, the fall of the Western Empire, parentheses Morocco, written in Black Law's dictionary, is referring to our fall, the All-Moroccan Empire called the Ottoman Empire, parentheses Moorish Empire, Empire Washita, Songhai Malian Empire, Egypto-Kushite Nubian Berber Empire, all one and the same. America was and is part of the dominions of the Moroccan Empire, parentheses Ottoman. Songhai see United States Code Title 22, Chapter 2, Section 141. Jurisdiction of the United States in Morocco was relinquished by memorandum of President Eisenhower dated September 15, 1956. Here's U.S. history left out of our textbooks. The Continental Congress was the early form of government of the USA for 16 years, 1774 to 1789. It was made up of 55 representatives, 35 Moors, 20 European sons, from the original 13 states. The Continental Congress first came together to protest certain measures of the British Parliament. These 35 Moors stem from 5 of the 13 states: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and North Carolina. The United States of America did not have an official written government until the Articles of Confederation was signed in 1781, which was right before it won its independence from Britain. Again, ask yourself, who are the real ones hiding the truth from American citizens, specifically the non-Moorish melanated people? According to this same website, it states that there were 14 presidents before George Washington. Some were Moors. More narratives by the Olmec Nubian confirming hidden history. John Hanson was an indigenous black man of Moorish nationality and the first president of the United States of America under the Articles of Confederation. John Hanson established one of the Great Seals of the United States of America, which all presidents have been required to use on all official documents. The first Great Seal was exclusively used for royalty of the royal families in Europe. Black Moorish nobles were intimately involved in the Continental Congress, establishing the Republic and the designing of the District of Columbia. In essence, the United States government was initially set up by black nobles and some European Freemasons, who were being taught by black nobles how to set up government. So here's confirmation that the Moors taught the current de facto government how to operate their Moorish government. The Moors did a reset with U.S. politics by removing themselves from the face of government, establishing the de facto governments. On this picture, it states, here are 5 Kushite Commission Moorish names that ties Indians, Indo, India, Indus, black to the sovereignty of America. El, Bey, Day, Al, and Ali. These 5 names belong to the 5 civilized tribes. These tribes are El, Cherokee, Bey, Choctaw, Day, Seminole, Al, Creek, and Ali, Chickasaw. The name El means God, force, or power. Bey means ruler or landlord. Day means knowledgeable. Al means the same as El, but Al, goddess, is feminine. Ali means the exalted or most high. These 5 civilized tribes came together to form a union called the Iroquois Confederation. This confederation formed the Articles of Confederation, which formed the American government. The Articles of Confederation became the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Articles of Association. These documents are called the 4 Constitutions. As you hear, all these documents that are mentioned in our history books linked to colonization are Moorish government documents. Here's more history from the Olmec Nubian. Quote, the Nubian Olmec Empire in Nuba, the Kish Empire, which later became the Kush or Kushite Empire, was created by the Nubians, which later became known as the Olmecs. There was no division in between Africa and America when the Olmecs migrated to the Americas or when they set up Mu, Lemuria, and Atlantis. Kish Empire, which was originally set up in Mesopotamia by the Olmecs, was later moved to Africa and became Kush before Kush, because there were 2 different Kush empires. The original Kish Empire existed many thousands of years before the Egyptian Empire. Because the Olmecs began the royal families in Uganda, Kenya, Nubia, and Ethiopia. We are the mother culture of all the Americas, North, South, and Central, end quote. What has been taught to us as Africa being the motherland was a lie. It has always been America, history that was changed by the Moors. This article I found had very compelling information about the meaning of George Washington cutting down the cherry tree, a story I remember being told in childhood. Well, I discovered that this story is a metaphor for the transition of power from the de jure government, legitimate government, to the de facto government, illegitimate government, that started with George Washington, the first U.S. president. I'll read the underlined portion, and for those who are unaware of the man named Prophet Noble Drew Ali, he's the Moor that founded the Moor Science Temple of America in Newark, New Jersey in 1913. This organization emphasizes Islamic principles and encourages members to embrace their Moorish heritage and practice Islam. It states, Prophet Noble Drew Ali traveled to see President Woodrow Wilson, and here he sat and they challenged him. Drew Ali raised his right hand and light filled the room. I came for the flag of our ancient forefathers. The president stated, It is not yet your time. Ali answered, I have been appointed in due time by Allah, the great God of the universe. The prophet stated, I am here for the Moorish flag, that which you called a cherry tree. Then they dusted off an old flag that was red with a 5-pointed green star in the center. What do you believe U.S. President Woodrow Wilson meant when he stated, it is not yet your time? And it continues on to say, the president, he said, we have had them so long that they will not follow anyone else, and to tell them would be like putting pants on a mule. The prophet stated, my flock knows my voice. The picture on the right explains the same thing mentioned in this article. I found this picture online, and there was a caption beside it that stated, Moors and Europeans worked together to start America. The Moroccan-American Treaty of Friendship was a bilateral agreement signed in 1786 between the United States and Morocco. It established diplomatic and commercial relations between the two nations and is considered the oldest treaty relationship in U.S. history. The treaty is still in effect and is seen as a testament to the enduring friendship between the United States and Morocco. Morocco is the place the Moors claim as their homeland. I'll only read the beginning of this treaty in Articles 1 and Article 6. This treaty can be found online. It states, in the name of Almighty God, this is a treaty of peace and friendship established between us and the United States of America, which is confirmed, and which we have ordered to be written in this book and sealed with our royal seal at our court of Morocco on the 25th day of the blessed month of Shaban, in the year 1200. Trusting in God, it will remain permanent. Article 1. We declare that both parties have agreed that this treaty, consisting of 25 articles, shall be inserted in this book and delivered to the Honorable Thomas Barclay, the agent of the United States now at our court, with whose approbation it has been made and who is duly authorized on their part, to treat with us concerning all the matters contained therein. Article 6. If any more shall bring citizens of the United States or their effects to His Majesty, the citizens shall immediately be set at liberty and the effects restored. And in like manner, if any more not a subject of these dominions shall make prize of any of the citizens of America or their effects, and bring them into any of the ports of His Majesty, they shall be immediately released, as they will then be considered as under His Majesty's protection. So here's the documentation stating a friendship between the Moors and U.S. government, and it still exists today. So any negativity the Moors showcase towards the government is just an act. This next part is so mind-altering that I was in total disbelief about what I found. And it's a lot to reveal, but as the saying goes, the truth shall come to light. Nothing is as it seems, which you can see. Here is part 2 of the Great World Deception. According to this source, published in 1844, it stated that Ham denoted Ethiopians and Shem denoted Assyrians and Syrians, both black, one group dark-skinned coily hair and the other group dark-skinned straight hair. Noah's sons is a metaphor for his descendants after the great flood, who are categorized into 3 groups. In the Bible, the order of Noah's sons goes from Shem, Ham, then Japheth. However, after intently investigating history, the Ham group of people were actually the first group after the flood, who were present before Shem, whom all other groups descend from. And that would be the Cushites, Canaanites, Mizraim, which is Egypt, and Put. This is a topic involving genetics. I know that science has done a great job at concealing the identities of certain groups of people while elevating other groups based on their alleged genetic research, proving or disproving certain traits and characteristics of particular groups. I'm not a geneticist nor believe everything that is backed by science, and I can't fully confirm everything I'm reporting. However, this is a very vital topic because it builds upon rarely discussed public information concerning the Davidic bloodline of the Bible. A haplogroup is a group of people who share a common ancestor based on specific genetic markers in their DNA, either on the Y chromosome, which is paternal, or mitochondrial DNA, which is maternal. These markers, called SNPs, are passed down through generations, allowing scientists to trace ancestry and migration patterns over long periods. Haplogroups are inherited, passed down from the parent to offspring. They are broadly categorized into maternal and paternal lineages. Y-DNA tests the Y chromosome passed from father to son in every generation, unmixed with any DNA of the mother. Mitochondrial DNA tests the mitochondria passed from mothers to all their children, but is only passed on by the females, unmixed with the DNA of the father. Haplogroups are typically assigned letter names such as A, B, C, etc. for broad classifications, with more specific subclass identified by numbers and letters such as H2 or M35. Haplogroups are used in genealogy, population genetics, and forensic science to study human origins, migration patterns, and genetic diversity. According to science, today's modern Homo sapiens evolved from the Homo erectus in Africa, with evidence suggesting a time frame of roughly 300,000 years ago. Homo erectus was the first hominin to leave Africa and colonize Asia and Europe, and to wield fire, followed by other species, including Homo sapiens. The out of Africa theory suggests that as modern humans migrated out of Africa, they largely replaced existing hominin populations in other parts of the world. Science states there are two waves of migrations out of Africa. The first wave was the Homo erectus 300,000 to 270,000 years ago, and the second wave was believed to have occurred between 70,000 and 50,000 years ago. According to some researchers, the second wave of human migration are genetically connected to today's modern populations. Now, here is information that you may never have heard of before. Research says that the Australo-Melanesians are descendants of an initial dispersal out of Africa by early anatomical modern humans, while all other populations are descendants of a later migration wave. Today's scientific research on genetics is largely based on populations of people who descend from the Abrahamic bloodline that started with Adam and Eve. And here's the shocker. The Adam and Eve bloodline goes back roughly 300,000 years ago. However, they're the more older living intelligent beings on this planet before this bloodline ever existed. Science has found the oldest evidence of humans of hominin species dating back millions of years ago. It's said that planet Earth is billions of years old. Therefore, 300,000 years ago is just a drop in the bucket. So ask yourself, where did these groups come from claiming their chosen one status from God? And who are they claiming for their creator or God to be? As I stated in the previous slide, modern genetic research is severely biased and largely based on populations of people who descend from the Abrahamic bloodline that starts with Adam and Eve. Y haplogroup A starts the Adamic line roughly 300,000 to 270,000 years ago. And as we can see, the Bible fails to give an accurate timeline of events. Based on my historical research, here are the specific paternal haplogroups reported to have direct bloodline connection to the Bible's Israelites, Ishmaelites, Arabs, Nubians, Egyptians, Hebrews, and so on. What was surprising is that other well-known groups spoken throughout world history books popped up as being associated with the Hamites, and I'll show this in another slide. Some sources point to haplogroup E containing the true DNA of the melanated Hebrew Israelites. The Bible follows lineage through the men, not women, which makes sense because the Bible is patriarchal in nature. So I understand why the need for a male heir is so vital for monarchs in history. Hopefully, I brought the awareness that the ones who colonized the world and in power are descendants of biblical people, Israelites and related kin, spreading their religion wherever they colonized. And this is why church and government are intimately connected, and billions of people are converted into Abrahamic religions. The graph on the left, haplogroup A would be at the top, highlighted in red, who stem from Neanderthal and Denisovan species. The writings are so small on this graph, so I'll list some of the ethnic groups. Sand people, Mbuti Pygmy. And pygmy is said to be a derogatory term, but I'm just saying it for context. Blaka Bushmen, Bantu, South Africa, Mandinka, Yoruba, Bantu/Kenya. This is the group of the first migration out of Africa 207,000 years ago. And then their descendants are the second wave migration, who are the Mozabite, Boudin, Palestinian, French, Italian, Basque, Druze, and so on. And from the first and second wave come the group of people categorized as Mongolians. Modern populations with the highest percentages of haplogroup A are today's Khoisan and the southern Sudanese. There are only rare cases of European men belonging to haplogroup A, all belonging to the same A1B1B2 subclad, which is normally found in East Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan, but also has been found in Egypt, the Arabian Peninsula, Palestine, Jordan, Turkey, Sicily, Sardinia, and Algeria. It was brought to Europe by Levantine people. Haplogroup A1A has been found in Finland, Norway, and eastern England. This subclad is normally found along the west coast of Africa, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, Mali, and Morocco, and could have come to Europe during the Paleolithic age. Now I'll read the passage to the right, which comes from the website ccg.org, and it says, quote, "We are certain from the Bible and historical records that Phut, who are the Libyans, Berbers, and Moors, went into Africa with the southern Cushitic people, who became the Ethiopians. We know that the haplogroup C movements of the northern Cushites went into Asia and formed the nucleus of the Mongols and Dravidians and Australian Aboriginals and Maori, as well as moving into the Americas, forming the Nadine, Chippewa, Cheyenne, and Apache, as well as moving south into the Maya. The haplogroup C has its origins with the stem that forms haplogroup B, and we know that this haplogroup was co-located with C and moved south into Central and West Africa. Thus, B is a division of Kush, and from that basis, there is only one haplogroup left unaccounted for in Africa, and that is Y-DNA haplogroup A, which came from the north and moved right into South Africa. These can be none other than the sons of Phut. The Libyans are now a mix of Libyos, the sons of Mizraim, and the Arabs. Mizraim and haplogroup E devolving to E3B and E3A. The Arabs are J with some I." End quote. I would like to make this very clear. Not all melanated people descend from these group of people. Problem is, we have only heard their narrative our entire lives, and our heritage has been erased. Look to the map on the left. Haplogroup E-M2, also known as E1B1A-M2, is in West Africa, found especially amongst Niger-Congo speaking populations. E-M35, also known as E1B1B, is located in the Levant area. Both migrated out of Nubia, known as Sudan. The passage to the right comes from Facebook about Hebrew Israelite DNA haplogroup E1B1A. Quote, "This haplogroup is found predominantly among Bantu, Negro descendants, to include but not limited to the African Limba, most West African tribes, Igbo Jews, Yoruba Jews, African Americans, Jamaicans, Brazilians, Haitians, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and other Negro-influenced races throughout South America, the Caribbean, and scattered across all different nations. Contrary to false DNA reporting, this is not a sub-Saharan or Hamitic haplogroup, it's Shemitic origin. This haplogroup represents the Y DNA of Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, end quote. So just look at all of these groups that he named. I can't corroborate all the information he is putting forth. However, intuitively, I feel that he knows intimate details about this history. The table to the left came from the same Facebook site from the previous slide. The table to the upper right, the color green, shows haplogroup E in Africa. Now look at the lower right. Isn't it interesting that a lot of the E1B1A live in the United States, particularly on the East Coast and the central US? Now look at Africa and Europe. They have less dots than America. I'm not sure of the sample size that was used in this study, but the narrative is that African Americans came from West Africa during the transatlantic slave trade. However, as I mentioned earlier, the true Africa or Egypt was in North America, and the migration of the E1B1A migrated from West, the Americas, to the East, Europe, not East to West. Here is something from the Olmec Nubian, quote, "What people fail to understand is that more than 250,000 years ago, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida was the northern part of what is now known as Africa today. In fact, what is known as Georgia, Florida, South Carolina was part of Egypt at one time. This further confirms that we are not all from Africa," end quote. I'll read the underlined portion in this passage. 60% of African Americans who were sampled in 2007 were of haplogroup E1B1A, within which 22.9% were particularly of haplogroup E-M2. An African American man who was sampled in 2013 carried haplogroup A00, which likely dates back to 338,000 years ago, and is a haplogroup shared with the Imbo people. Everything that they said happened in the continent they call Africa. Of course, now we know it actually happened right here in the United States. Then it goes on to say, one African American population, those from South Carolina, clustered with the African populations. Notably, the South Carolina population falls nearest to the Grain Coast populations. Ethno-historical records indicate a relationship between African Americans within this region of the United States and West Africans from Senegal, Gambia, and Sierra Leone. Due to the X chromosomes in African Americans having high concentration of ancestry from Africa, this coheres with the understanding of there being an asymmetric flow of genes from European males to African females. Consequently, this can be understood as being the result of enslaved African American females being raped by European males. Because I've done much research on this topic, I can discern the truth from the lies, and 60% of African Americans having the haplogroup E1B1A is a very significant number. The graph on the last slide showed the highest concentration of E1B1A in the central United States and eastern coasts. If you look at a world map and see the eastern borders of North and South America and western borders of Africa and angle Africa to the right, you can see how these lands would perfectly align, suggesting that just like the Olmec Nubian said, these lands were connected. Because there is such a strong presence of E1B1A haplogroup in African Americans, one can now reason that this haplogroup has been here the entire time and not from West Africa. So this totally obliterates the claims about a transatlantic slave trade then. Major lies by the Black nobility, aka Moorish nobility / Black Israelites, hiding the fact they are responsible for U.S. colonization. turning the truth upside down and casting white people as their fall guys. The way people tell a story shapes perception. So this would mean the reverse of what we have been taught. Some West African tribes carry African American DNA. In the section about X chromosomal DNA, there is enough historical evidence that proves this is a lie. The reason for European ancestry in African American females is because the Europeans were black people, not the common narrative of the rape by a white European master. Historically, most mulatto children were from the union of a black man and white woman. These groups have the same paternal DNA of the Hebrew Israelites according to the sources I found. These groups come from the same stock of people and names have changed over time. In the case of the Ashkenazi Jews, regardless of their phenotype or physical traits like skin color, genetically they have the paternal lineage of these melanated people. Consider a melanated man who procreates with different women of varying skin color and hair types. He has 5 male children with 5 women of different races. The looks of these children could range from dark to light or even pale skin tone, curly to straight hair. But regardless of the children's looks, they have all the same paternal DNA. Being taught that race has to do with looks instead of bloodline was intentionally done to deceive us. The caption under the picture reads, "The term Caucasian race, also Caucasoid, Europeid, or Europoid, has been used to denote the general physical type of some of all the populations of Europe, North Africa, the Horn of Africa, Western Asia, the Middle East, parts of Central Asia, and South Asia. Historically, the term has been used to describe many peoples from these regions without regard necessarily to skin tone. Western Asia is the alleged origins of the biblical Afro-Asiatic people. Afro-Asiatic language are a large family of languages spoken across West Asia, North Africa, the Horn of Africa, and the Sahel. The term Afro-Asiatic encompasses 6 main branches: Berber, Chadic, Cushitic, Egyptian, Amadic, and Semitic. While most branches are indigenous to Africa, the Semitic branch originated in West Asia. The Caucasian race is a bloodline. It is not, and I mean not, about skin tone or color. All of these groups share a common ancestor regardless of their phenotype. And this is the greatest deception that has been perpetuated today. The promotion of the Caucasian race historically has been about the political, social, and financial advancement of this bloodline. The bloodline that started with the dark-skinned melanated Shem and Ham, and then after thousands of years gave way to Japheth, who are today's albinoid people devoid of melanin, known as white people. Look to the left. This is a pictograph of people belonging to the haplogroup tied to the sons of Abraham. Notable South African President Nelson Mandela belongs to E1B1A, and Albert Einstein, Adolf Hitler, Napoleon Bonaparte are haplo E1B1B. So genetics can be very deceiving, and most of us are aware of the evilness of Hitler and Napoleon. This bloodline has always had ties to world power and crooked world power, to be specific. Race has nothing to do with physicality or physical features, but those who share a common ancestor. The etymology of race from 1560s said that it was people descended from a common ancestor, class of persons allied by common ancestry. To the right, this passage comes from a source on internetarchive.org. The underlined portion reads, Semitic, the Nephilim. These were the offspring of the sons of God who in Genesis interbred with humans' creation as a race of fallen, as in fallen angels. They were also known as the Watchers in the book of Enoch. Much speculation has arisen in the modern times as their origins, yet the most likely scenario is that they were invading Aryans who conquered, enslaved, and interbred with the Proto-Australoids indigenous to the region, creating the Proto-Semitic peoples, the Canaanites and Amorites, two races of giants supposedly descended from Canaan who lived in an underworld kingdom called Arca. Now, this is the background information that is not clearly stated in the Bible. Again, more lies and omissions that science, the church, and the government has hidden from us, because these are them and their systems we have been living in. Let me stress again, Caucasoid or Caucasian is not about pale skin or bone straight hair. It is a bloodline. Australoid groups located in Southeast Asia who are dark-skinned to black-skinned people were categorized in history belonging to the archaic Caucasoid race, but today they are designated as Negroid type. Over time, this corrupt system has changed definitions of words or made up new race categories to confuse us all and fulfill their agendas. Now, given the real definition of race in European, how are we to know what skin color those Europeans were that came to colonize America allegedly in the 15th century? Science, or shall I say our government, like to spread the false narrative that O blood type is the oldest blood type on earth, which is further from the truth. A and B blood types are the oldest on earth and are dominant. O is the youngest blood type on earth and is recessive. A and B comes before O in the alphabet, denoting a relationship of their order. I can't provide an accurate timeline of any of these blood types because remember, much of the information given to us in our books and on the internet is filtered and controlled by government agendas and what they want us to believe. Here's a simple explanation about the child blood type chart that's located on the left. The left in green represents the different unions of blood types from a mother and father, and in the light colored area are the offspring's potential blood types. For instance, parents who are both A blood type could have an offspring with A or O blood type. Now, the chart on the right gives the statistics or likelihood of the blood type outcome of the offspring. At the top, an A blood type mother and father has a higher chance of having a child with A blood type and a lower chance of having a child with O blood type based on percentages. On the same chart on the far right, the O blood type category, we can see that across the board, it is less likely to have an O child than it is to have an AB, A, or B child, except when both parents are O blood types. The low percentages are because the O blood type is a recessive blood type. So this shows that the O allele is not the oldest on Earth, as well as not indigenous to Earth. I won't go deep into this topic because I have previous videos where I discuss this in greater detail. According to Google AI, 47% of African Americans are O positive, followed by 24% are A positive and 18% are B positive. I have no way to confirm that these numbers are true, but multiple sources state similar statistics. However, that is not related to the point I'm making about the different blood types. A and B blood types can have O blood type in their lineage, and the opposite is true as well, because blood types is about probabilities. Now, what science fails to reveal intentionally is that the O blood type denotes a different species of humans, a major cover-up by those in power. This is the bloodline of the fallen angels created by the Nephilim as discussed 2 slides back. The Nephilim are not from this planet, a major secret and cover-up by government, church, and science. Forever, world governments have denied the existence of extraterrestrials or aliens, making this topic seem fantasy or sci fi. They are the masters at putting the truth in our faces, however, manipulating the truth through false narratives such as labeling sci fi or fantasy. Here's a statement that comes from the Olmec Nubin's paper, and it states: the original O blood does not have these antigens and is the predominant blood of Moors or black people and Native Americans. The Olmecs have O blood. The original Cometians or Nuapians have O blood, and 80% of the Native Americans have O blood. The reason that most of the Native Americans of today are O blood is because they are descendants of the Olmecs, who are the first black Native Americans. The Bible's nomadic Afro-Asiatics, the Black Hebrews, are the O blood type, who accompanied the Anunnaki Elohim and landed here in Americas, because here is the real Atlantis on this soil. Therefore, with all this said, African Americans with O blood type or melanated or non-melanated people with O blood type are of a different species of humans on Earth, from the bloodline of the Nephilim, who are the Olmecs, also known in history as the Anunnaki. In summary, there are two different species of melanated people on American soil: one native and one indigenous. The Sea People were any of the groups of aggressive, violent seafarers who invaded eastern Anatolia, which is today's Turkey, Syria, Palestine, Cyprus, and Egypt towards the end of the Bronze Age, especially in the 13th century BCE. The Bronze Age marks the start of the Abrahamic religions. The Sea People were a destructive group of 9 tribes. They may have been a loose confederation of various groups, or even different waves of migrations and attacks over time. They were not a single unified force, but rather a collection of different groups who shared a common seafaring lifestyle and raided together. Some groups included the Greeks and the Philistines. Sea People, Philistines, and Greeks under the identity of Javan are groups who are mentioned in the Bible. The underlying portion says, the dark feature Rh negative Berbers, originally from Morocco, Algiers, and Senegal, who had discovered and populated the Canary and Cape Verde Islands, all of the Atlantic islands off Europe. The Berber from Morocco likely were the Sheklish, while the people of Britain may have been called the Akawasha. It appears that the people of the Hebrides in Scotland were known to the Egyptians as the Tirana. Moors claim they're from Morocco, who includes the Berbers and Arabs. The Rh factor is a protein on the surface of red blood cells. If your blood has this protein, you are Rh positive. If it doesn't, you are Rh negative. The Rh factor is inherited from your parents and is part of your blood type. For instance, A positive or A negative, O positive and O negative. There are links between Nephilim and Rh negative factor. Rh negative was introduced into the human species population from genetic splicing experiments done by the Nephilim, mixing their DNA with Denisovans and Neanderthal, creating the group called Australoid, also known as the Australo-Melanesians. These are the black people of the Bible. And I'll read the third paragraph. The highest percentage is found among some of the tribes still living in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, 40%. The next highest is the Basque, the people of Northwest Ireland, the Highland Scots, and the Western Islanders of Norway. In addition, 2 small isolated populations of the same tribe, one in Chad and another in Senegal. A book by Dr. John L. Johnson. Here are drawings of Moorish kings of Scotland in the 19th and 10th centuries who would have been Catholic with blood ties to the Vatican. The caption beneath the picture on the left states how the white royals of Great Britain are descendants of the Moors. Now I'll delve into talking about Moorish indentured servitude. Indentured servitude was most common in the Northeast than chattel slavery. The Northeast, particularly New York, followed by Philadelphia, has the largest black Muslim population. What we know the Moors to be today are Muslims practicing Islam. Before diving into the subject of Muslim indentured servitude, in the next few slides, I'll actually explain what indentured servitude is. This states indentured servitude was a significant labor system in colonial America, particularly in the Northeast, where it played a vital role in populating the colonies and providing labor for various industries. Indentured servants were individuals who agreed to work for a specified period, typically 3 to 7 years, in exchange for transportation to the colonies, housing, food, and clothing. So in essence, indentured servants were voluntary contract workers, compensated in multiple ways. And what's shocking is that this labor force was sought overseas to come to the colonies to work, and sea transportation was paid for. A vast difference from chattel slavery. Here are facts about indentured servitude. While not slaves, indentured servants faced harsh conditions and were bound to their masters by contract, often with limited rights. However, they weren't slaves though. Indentured servitude gradually declined, but it remained important in the Northeast, especially New York and Pennsylvania. Upon completing their contracts, indentured servants often received freedom dues, which could include land, tools, clothing, or other goods to help them establish themselves. So again, these people are not slaves, and after a contract of 3 to 7 years of work, they were assisted by their overseer to get on their feet in the American colonies. What I'm doing here is building up to make the point that Black people, we all do not have monolithic lives or experiences in this country. We were not all treated in an oppressive manner in America's past. And I'll read from this passage. During the American colonial period, a free man was a person who was not a slave. The term originated in 12th century Europe. In the Massachusetts Bay Colony, a man had to be a member of the church to be a free man. In neighboring Plymouth Colony, a man did not need to be a member of the church, but he had to be elected to this privilege by the general court. Being a free man carried with it the right to vote, and in Plymouth, only free men could vote by 1632. Black Law's Dictionary, 9th edition, defines free man as follows: a person who possesses and enjoys all the civil and political rights belonging to the people under a free government. A person who is not a slave. A member of a municipal corporation, a city or borough, who possesses full civic rights, especially the right to vote. Now pay attention to this. Freedom was earned after an allotted time or after the person demanding payment was satisfied. This was known as indentured servitude and was not originally intended as a stigma or embarrassment for the person involved. Many of the sons and daughters of the wealthy and famous of the time found themselves forced into such temporary servitude. Gary Nash reporting that many of the servants were actually nephews, nieces, cousins, and children of friends of immigrating Englishmen who paid their passage in return for their labor once in America. An indentured servant would sign a contract agreeing to serve for a specific numbers of years, typically 5 or 7. Many immigrants to the colonies came as indentured servants, with someone else paying their passage to the colonies in return for a promise of service. At the end of his service, according to the contract, the indentured servant usually would be granted a sum of money, a new suit of clothes, land, or perhaps passage back to England. An indentured servant was not the same as an apprentice or a child who was placed out. Continued from the previous slide. Progression to free man status. Initially, a male was not formally considered free when entering into a colony or just recently having become a member of one of the local churches. He was considered common. Such persons were never forced to work for another individual per se, but their movements were carefully observed, and if they veered from the Puritan ideal, they were asked to leave the colony. There was an unstated probationary period, usually 1 to 2 years, that the prospective free man needed to go through, and he was allowed his freedom if he did pass this probationary period of time. A free man was said to be free of all debt, owing nothing to anyone except God himself. Now on to free planter. A free planter, as opposed to a free man, was any landholder who possessed land outright that was usually given to him by the colony after he had finished his probationary period, except in those cases where the landowner had inherited his property. But if he was deemed legally incompetent, didn't pass his probationary period, or again lost his freedom through some irresponsibility of his own, he would have his land and property confiscated and redistributed among the remaining freemen, even if the inheritor was a well-respected citizen. And this goes back to the Black French Creole people who would come to New Orleans as free people of color. To summarize, indentured servitude in many instances was a ticket to gain citizenship and free person status in a new country after years of compensated service to another colonist. Therefore, in many cases, Muslims or Israelites as chattel slave labor is a false narrative. Islam has had a presence in the greater Philadelphia region since the colonial era, and because Philadelphia has one of the largest Black Muslim populations in America, I investigated Muslim colonial life in Philly. From PhiladelphiaEncyclopedia.org, it stated, quote, "In the colonial era, Philadelphia became a prominent center of wealth and economic activity in British North America, largely due to its strategic location for trade and its diverse industries." From a journal article called Hidden Gems Investigating Muslim Ethnicity on Pennsylvania's Colonial Frontier, it states, quote, "The charm is most likely a relic of the mid-18th century, when the first Africans entered central Pennsylvania as slaves, indentured servants, or freemen through trading operations and farmsteads, bringing with them their religious beliefs and material culture," end quote. I asked the question to AI, what was most used in Philadelphia, chattel slavery or indentured servants? And the answer, quote, "While both forms of forced labor were present in Philadelphia, indentured servitude was most widely utilized in the city, especially in the early colonial period. Pennsylvania, particularly the Philadelphia region, had a significant reliance on indentured servitude. It's estimated that 2/3 of the people who came to Pennsylvania came as indentured servants. However, in Pennsylvania, while chattel slavery was present and increased over time, indentured servitude remained a significant labor system for a longer period compared to other colonies, such as those in the South," end quote. So using logic, I reasoned that many Muslims, African Muslims, came to the States on work contracts as indentured servants, more than chattel slaves in the Northeast. Another source that I found stated, quote, It has been shown that research has been conducted in the West during the 20th century and proven existence of Muslims on the American mainland approximately 7 centuries before Christopher Columbus. While England remained an important source of servants in the 18th century, by the late 1720s, growing numbers of Scots Irish, and German speaking servants arrived in the Delaware Valley as part of a larger immigrant flow. Young single men composed a large proportion of the Scots Irish and Southern Irish immigrants who obtained credit for their passage by agreeing to serve as indentured servants. Indentured servants were men and women who signed a contract by which they agreed to work for a certain number of years in exchange for transportation to Virginia, and once they arrived, food, clothing, and shelter were provided. End quote. The Jacobite Rebellion was a series of uprisings in Scotland and England between 1689 and 1746, aimed at restoring the Stuart dynasty to the British throne after the Glorious Revolution. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 established a Protestant monarchy. Jacobites, driven by dynastic loyalty and religious beliefs, opposed the new Protestant monarchy and desired the return of the Stuarts, who were Catholics. Jacobites saw the Stuarts as the rightful ruling dynasty, believing they had the divine right to rule. The defeat of Jacobites in Scotland effectively ended Jacobitism as a significant political movement, securing a Protestant British throne. Consequences of the Jacobites losing the battle resulted with many Jacobite soldiers being either executed, imprisoned, or exiled to the British colonies in the Americas. Many lowland Scots celebrated the defeat of the Highland Jacobites, and economic progress came to the lowlands through the Union and access to the trade routes of its empire. So I hope you understand that wars are always about money. Now, throughout the 18th century, Jacobites staged rebellions in Scotland and elsewhere in 1715, 1719, and 1745 in an attempt to restore the Stuart monarchy. These were black people, black Israelites, or shall I say Israelites, who are colonizers, not nomads. Jacobites, who are Israelites, were exiled to the Americas because they lost the battle in Scotland. The dominant religion among the first settlers in America was Christian, primarily in the form of Protestantism, while the Spanish and Portuguese brought Catholicism to North America. The English colonies were largely populated by Protestants seeking religious freedom. The book Jacobite Gleanings of State Manuscripts, written in 1903, discussed the Jacobite transportation to the Americas in 1745. Jacobites are Israelites that inhabited Scotland and England. And after seeing these next few slides, you'll pretty much doubt the narrative of black Israelites being brought to the Americas as chattel slave labor. The underlined portion reads, "What gave the transportation idea a forward impulse was the craze for colonial expansion, which created the need for soldiers to fight the French. On 24th June 1746, the Governor W. Pepperell afterwards created an aristocrat and whose authority ranged over a large tract of country, writing from Boston, gave a suggestion for the employment of Jacobite prisoners, the ones who lost the battles in Scotland. Could it be, though expedient, that 200 of the rebel prisoners who may have been unwarily seduced should be sent over for Mr. Shirley's and my army? It might be means of making good subjects of them." These are American state officials and aristocrats needing soldiers looking to employ the Israelite rebel prisoners from Scotland. And then it goes on to say, garrison consisted of 2,517 men, and the governor reported that the soldiers were dying very fast with fluxes, 8 or 10 a day. So, with the high number of deaths, the Massachusetts governor was desperate for soldiers. I'll continue reading the underlined portion. On 6 October 1747, the War Department offered a pardon to rebels who would enlist into the independent companies of Admiral Boscawen's expedition. It is a curious circumstance that while rebellious, Scotland was thus supplying the colonies with troops. Governor Pepperell's appeal for soldiers from Jacobite sources application was made for rebel prisoners being sent as recruits for armies serving in North America and West Indies as follows. Another curious feature in connection with the colonies was the War Department intelligence contained in their records that the Nova Scotians threatened a revolt on a report of the rebellion in Scotland. Accordingly, letters were promised on 26 March 1747 to be sent to the various governors named regarding the powers of the contractors and stating that the prisoners were transported for the term of their natural lives and that they must enter into indenture. The first records of transportation in this rebellion was of 47 rebels shipped at Liverpool on 26 April 1746 for the plantations. So in summary, history reveals that the Israelites from Scotland came to North America as indentured servants to work on plantation and as mercenaries who are Scottish prisoners of war. These were black people fighting other black people of different religious affiliations, but all from the same stock of people. The indigenous black people of Earth did not belong to these religions, but were assimilated by force into their religions. This is from the same book. It's a list and description of 150 rebel prisoners going to the Caribbean in 1747. Look under the remarks section. You see that these European rebel prisoners are physically described as black, brown, swarthy, and ruddy. Also, look at all the last names. The European last names in America comes from black Europeans, not white Europeans. Now I'll switch gears from talking about the Israelite Moors from Scotland to the Muslim Moors that inhabited Spain. And this is from medium.com. The term Moors refers primarily to the Muslim inhabitants of the Maghreb, the Iberian Peninsula, Sicily, and Malta during the Middle Ages. The Moors initially were the Berber autochthons of the Maghreb. The name was later also applied to Arabs. I knew several people who must have been from what I have since learned Mohammedans, Muslims, though at that time I had never heard of the religion of Muhammad. There was one man on this plantation who prayed 5 times every day, always turning his face to the east, when in the performance of his devotion. Charles Ball, 1837. This is an excerpt from the 1837 autobiography of Charles Ball, a black man that escaped slavery. This is from the same article on medium.com, continued from the previous slide. Quote, in Georgia in 1803, Bilali bin Ali Muhammad and his family arrived in Georgia on Sapelo Island. Bilali Muhammad was a Fula and Timbo Futa Jalan in present-day Guinea-Conakry. By 1806, he became the plantation manager for Thomas Spalding, a prominent Georgian master. One of his sons is reported as being Aaron of Joel Chandler Harris' work, author of Uncle Remus and Briar Rabbit stories. All his daughters but one could speak English, French, Fula, Gullah, and Arabic. Bilali was well educated in Islamic law. While enslaved, Bilali became the community leader and imam of at least 80 men. During the War of 1812, Bilali told his slave master that he had 80 men of the true faith to help defend the land against the British. Bilali bin Ali was the leader of one of America's earliest known Muslim communities. It's documented that in 1812, there were at least 80 Muslims living on the plantation controlled by bin Ali from 1806 to the late 1830s. Bilali was known for regularly wearing his fez, a long coat, praying 5 times a day facing the east, fasting during the month of Ramadan, and celebrating the 2 holidays when they came. Bilali was buried with his Quran and prayer rug. End quote. Now, this doesn't sound like chattel slavery. All these liberties granted to this man and his family, his son authored a well-known children's book, his daughters allowed to be multilingual without consequence, he voluntarily fought against the British, and it seems he never was seeking freedom for himself and his family from the plantation. Saying enslaved or slavery in this passage is misleading. This is indentured servitude. This is a picture and article speaking about Melungeons, who are Muslim Moors. I'll speak in greater detail about the Melungeons in later slides, and I'll read the caption on the picture and the underlined portion in the article to the right. How it began. Melungeons. This distinct race of people living in eastern Tennessee are said to be a direct descendants of the ancient Phoenicians, coming from Morocco in the early days of the U.S. Their light brown complexion led people to believe they were mulattoes, hence the name Melungeon, from French mélange, meaning mixture. The Melungeons, an article from 1994, and it states, perhaps Nancy Hanks, the mother of Abraham Lincoln, was Melungeon. It somehow seems fitting that one of America's greatest presidents should be of mixed race and probable Muslim heritage. But who are the Melungeons? Historical records document that from 1492 through the early 1600s, an estimated 500,000 Jews and Muslims were exiled from Spain and Portugal. Other Muslims, Berbers in particular, Moriscos they were called, made their way to the Canary Islands, India, France, and other countries. And interestingly enough, wherever these exiled Berbers went, they identified themselves as Portuguese, even if they had originated in Spain. In fact, the term Portuguese became almost synonymous for both the Muslims and the Jews who had been exiled during the Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition, horrible as it was, accomplished something of great historical value for Islam. Even though Western historians have generally ignored the evidence, there is little doubt that Muslims played an early, perhaps the earliest role in the permanent settlement of this nation. And there is little doubt that the Inquisition, with all its agonies, drove Spanish and Portuguese Muslims toward the New World. So, in presenting a new perspective about American history, what are your thoughts? Now, hear this from this passage. Most are unaware that the Portuguese Jews were responsible for the first form of slavery in the Caribbean. Same article from website medium.com talking about Muslims in colonial America. And it reads, however, Muslims also experience open hostility and hardship when practicing their faith. Ayuba Suleiman Diallo was pelted with dirt by a white boy in Kent Island, Maryland, as he prayed. Others were forced to wear sacrilegious clothing, ignore dietary rules and religious fasting, or abstain from the required prayers. An unnamed Moorish slave in Louisiana confirmed this hardship in 1822 when he lamented, that his situation as a slave in America prevents him from obeying the dictates of his religion. Nevertheless, they preserved and lived their faith. Many became pseudo converts to Christianity to protect themselves and their families, and they had to hide their true beliefs. Lamin Kibi pretended to convert to Christianity in order to secure passage back to Africa through the American Colonization Society. However, after returning to Africa, Kibi disappeared into Sierra Leone, surely still retaining his Mohammedan creed. Others like Ayuba Suleiman Diallo refused to budge in their faith and were rewarded for it. His faith impressed his slave owners so much that he was freed and provided passage back to Africa, receiving a royal welcome in England on the way. So these wars were religious, which is political. These wars were not based on racism. Famous and racist presidents Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and Abraham Lincoln had Moorish heritage. Here it says, the founding fathers were aware of Islam and the presence of Muslims in America. Thomas Jefferson, who owned a copy of the Quran, included Islam in many of his early writings and political treaties. Campaigning for religious freedom in Virginia, Jefferson argued in the proposed Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom that neither pagan nor Mohammedan, Muslim, nor Jew ought to be excluded from the civil rights of the Commonwealth because of his religion. Now, did you know there are more than 500 names of places, villages, streets, towns, cities, lakes, rivers, etc. in the United States in which their name are derived from African, Islamic, and Arabic words? Here is more unknown history about the people known as Melungeons. In an article on a previous slide, it was said that these Muslim Moors arrived by sea from Spain and Portugal to North America, who also played a role in the permanent settlement of this nation, America. Now I'll read from this passage. Quote, they settled in Virginia 1 year before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. They sparked a major conflict between the English crown and American colonies, 150 years before the American Revolution. They lived free in the South nearly 240 years before the American Civil War. Yet, the African ancestors of the American Melungeons have remained elusive ghosts for the past 4 centuries. The missing characters in the developing saga of America's largest mixed community. Now finally, though stridently denied by some descendants and misunderstood by others, the African fathers and mothers of Melungia mixture are beginning to emerge from the dim pages of the past to take their rightful places of honor in American history. One misconception over Melungeon origins comes from confusion over the status of these African Americans who, along with whites and Indians, gave birth to this mixed community. Modern scholars mistakenly assume that the African heritage of Melungeons derives from the offspring of white plantation owners and black female chattel slaves in the years 1780 to 1820. Not one single Melungeon family can be traced to a white plantation owner and his black female slave. The vast majority of the African ancestors of Melungia were freeborn for more than 300 years. Melungeons are not the offspring of white southern plantation owners and helpless black slaves. Most of the African ancestors of Melungeons were never chattel slaves. They were frequently black men freed from indentured servitude, just like many white servants of the 17th century. Less often, African ancestors of the Melungeons either purchased their freedom from slavery or were freed upon the deaths of their master. Understanding the status of the African American ancestors of the Melungeons and the era in which they came to America is critical to understanding their history and the origin of the name Melungeon. End quote. So they were not initially mixed race or mulatto. The first people who identified themselves as Melungeons were Africans. If you look up Melungeons on the internet today, what you would be seeing are the mulatto albino descendants, and some well-known mixed race Melungeons include Abraham Lincoln, Elvis Presley, George Clooney, Tom Hanks. These are people with darker hair, dark eyes, and tawny skin tones. Continued. In the Stony Creek case in the early 1800s, the presence of just a little African blood in Melungeons raised tensions because Melungeons were otherwise white. Blacks, free, and slave were welcome to worship with whites at the Stony Creek Church. Melungeons were not. However, this was not always the case in the history of Virginia. Once upon an earlier time in America, mixed Melungeons and indeed many full-blooded Africans were strangers to prejudice. Melungeons are an ethnically diverse group originated in early 1600s, Virginia, Carolina, Maryland, and Delaware. Their descendants later spread into Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, Louisiana, and Texas. The earliest Melungeon ancestors were white Northern Europeans, Bantu Africans, and North American Indians. Among the Northern Europeans, the Melungeon ancestors include English, Scot, Irish, Welsh, Dutch, and German parents. North American Indian ancestors included people from the various tribes. From the 1620s, in southern British colonies like Virginia, white Northern Europeans intermarried with Indians. They also intermarried with Africans who began entering the American colonies as early as 1619. Melungeons originate from these red, white, and black peoples in this period of American history. They begin forming identifiable separated mixed communities when the first anti-African laws started restricting some of their freedoms by 1660. Until recently, not much has been known about the Melungeons' African ancestors. New evidence now indicate that the black ancestors of Melungeons were peoples of Kimbundu and Kikonga, speaking Angola and historic Congo, along Africa's lower west coast. The nation of Mbundu in Angola yielded more black ancestors from Melungeons than any other African people. So these mixed heritage Melungeons who were strangers to prejudice wake up one day and poof, laws were created to discriminate against them. Racism is a made-up human construct which was instituted by Moors fulfilling agendas. And it goes on to say, the Stony Creek mention of Melungeons reveals the name was a common word familiar to Virginians at least as early as the beginning of the 19th century. Free Melungeons of mixed red, white, and black ancestry originated within one generation of the first Angolans who arrived in Virginia in 1619 and who continued coming to the southern tidewater colonies through 1720. These early Africans were Kimbundu-speaking Angolans who, like Angolans in Brazil, described themselves as Mulungu. Within a decade of arriving in Virginia, after serving about 7 to 10 years of indentured servitude, these Angolan ancestors of the Melungeons were free to move from county to county. They were free as early as 1640 to own property and to name their community in their native Kimbundu language. The name Melungeon was not applied to these first Africans by white outsiders or slave owners. It was a name they called themselves. Stony Creek Church records show the name Melungeon began in Virginia and not in Tennessee. As we shall see, mixed Melungeons existed in Virginia by 1680, when their Angolan fathers were still speaking Kimbundu as well as English. The origin of the name Melungeon in Virginia and not Tennessee, and the presence of the Kimbundu speaking Angolans in Virginia by 1680 strongly support a Kimbundu African etymology for the name Melungeon. In this article, I recall reading in these times, white people knew they had black ancestry and knew they were black. So racial discrimination seen today is global social conditioning. Many of the Native American tribes who were all initially under the umbrella of the Olmec Empire, Washita Empire, or the Yamasee Nation of the southeastern region of the Americas, called us Nesu or Blackbird person. Nesu and Nasu were the indigenous titles of us as the Black Eagle people or the black seed of the black nobles. Another group of the Olmecs migrated to the Americas, North, South, and Central. They were called Washoe or Raccoon people in North America and settled into the areas of Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Georgia under the names Washita and Yamasee. The original 12 tribes of Yamasee and their children were the Akani, Akamolji, Yamakra, Catawba, Comanche, Arikara, Cherokee, Choctaw, Kiowa, Peku, Mohawk, Creek, Cheyenne, Crow, Shinnecock, Mandan, Sioux, Blackfoot, Seminole, Shoshone, Navajo, Powhatans, Yamasee, Nez Perce, Zuni, and Mohawken. The reason that most of the Native Americans of today have old blood is because they are descendants of the Olmecs, who are the first black Native Americans. They were already here in the Americas millions of years before the continental drift, according to the records of our ancestors, and they originally came from Ceres, not Africa. They were all over the planet Earth, and they even built monuments on the planet Mars as well. They also had the genetic blueprint and chemical charts for designing specific races of people. The imperial She clan dynasty of the Olmecs or Nubans is recorded as being the oldest indigenous people and dynasty of the Americas. The Olmecs, for example, are now recognized as the mother culture of all the Americas, North, South, and Central America, by most scientists, historians, and archaeologists. And these are words told by the Olmec Nubian. Everything they say is happening in the Eastern world or going to happen is taking place here in America. The news is a tool used to mislead us as well as a distraction. This map came from a website and it's another confession about America's history given by a Moor. According to this map, the real Morocco is located in the state of Indiana. The real Palestine is located in the state of Texas. The real Greece is located in the state of New York. The real England is located in the state of Wisconsin. And the Strait of Gibraltar is located in the Great Lakes of Michigan. This passage is from a website for Black people who are seeking to legally claim their Native American status as a Moorish American and Olmec descendant in the United States. I'll read the underlined sentences. Who are the She Amaru? The She Amaru are historically called the Olmec. We are the oldest indigenous civilization in the Americas. We are the pyramid and mound building civilizations of North America. Amaru means serpent, chief, warrior. Kokukan or Kukamats means winged serpent. The Delaware, Powhatan, and other Atlantic and Southern tribes were all known as black tribes before the 1800s. Today's descendants of Olmecs are legally claiming Native American heritage and rights to the lands of the United States that was taken by the so-called white government given to the fake Native Americans. The Olmec bloodline is the bloodline of the Nephilim. Many, but not all, melanated people in America are from this bloodline. Continued. What is the Aboriginal Republic of North America? The Aboriginal Republic of North America is the world's first indigenous government. ARNA operates a national plebiscite for indigenous people throughout our jurisdiction. The purpose of our plebiscite is to implement an autonomous indigenous government, specifically for the unlawfully denationalized Aboriginal Americans and or those with Moorish descent who were unlawfully denationalized and made prisoners of war, so-called slavery. The act of committing Aboriginal Americans and those with Moorish descent to a status of prisoners of war, so-called slavery, without respect for internation treaties between the political jurisdiction was unlawful. If you do not claim your proper political status, you cannot claim slavery was illegal. You are not going to get lawful legal remedy as a misnomer, African American, Negro, etc. These people are lying. They're the tricksters falsifying their indigenous status in America. I commonly hear the narrative of today's Moors talking about building up the black community and evil white colonizers. But here is information stating their preference for albino/white women in the Middle Ages. One source I read said they were obsessed with white women in history. Melungeons are their mixed race relatives. The Moors had harems of women, and many albino women were valued at a higher price than melanated women. The Israelite Moors and Muslim Moors historically have never been Pan-African. Pan-African is the global unification of the African diaspora standing against colonialism, capitalism, and white supremacy, and collectively unifying for socio-political and economic progress. The common thread I hear is to unify all melanated people and return to Africa. But why would one return to a continent that they did not descend from? Again, Moors weren't Pan-African just 100 or so years ago. So Muslims leading the Pan-African movement and Black Power movements is a joke, as well as the Black Hebrew Israelites teaching about Black nationalism. Both groups were involved in the Black slave labor and trade. And this is from a website article entitled Barbary Pirates, the Muslim Corsairs and Their Role in the Slave Trade. Quote, Barbary pirates, or corsairs, were the outlaws of the waves before the golden age of piracy. From the 16th century onwards, these Muslim pirates operated out of the main ports along the North African coast, raiding towns and seizing merchant ships, primarily across the Mediterranean, although they did also venture into Northern Europe and along the Atlantic coast of West Africa. Unlike pirates, corsairs had the legal backing of sovereign states from among both the Ottomans and their European rivals, who sponsored corsairs' activities in maritime borderland regions such as North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean. They were to capture slaves for the Ottoman Empire's slave trade. The pirates didn't discriminate about who they captured and placed in servitude. The makeup of those being forced into slavehood was a tangle of races, nationalities, and religions. The pirates weren't fussy, although Italian and Spanish slaves fetched a better price than Northern Europeans. Many of the Barbary pirates amassed great riches while also developing fearsome reputations. North African piracy had very ancient origins. Here is an article from December 29, 1903, entitled, The Slaves of Morocco Happier Than Freemen. I'll read the first half of this article and you can draw your own conclusions about Pan-Africanists. The slave trade of Morocco grows less year by year as France extends her military power over the sandy regions to the south of the Sultan's dominions. Formerly, the terrors of the southern slave route could be learned from slaves who had come that way to be sold at Marrakesh or Fez. They told of children from the far interior too young to walk, exchanged for rock salt by the tribes of the interior, and dying by hundreds in the panniers of the trader en route. France entered Algeria and slowly pushed her way south, east, and west. The occupation of the oasis of Tuat cut off the caravans from that direction, and when Timbuktu was occupied, another bar was put up against the traffic in humanity. Hence, the supply of captives from the interior has so gone down that the result in Morocco is twofold. The price is higher, and the Moor treats his captives better. Indeed, there is seldom much to complain of in the treatment. Compared with the poor freemen in this poverty-stricken land, the slave is sleek and comfortable as a rule. True, the Moor may kill him or starve him as easily as he wishes, but he is property of price and is cared for accordingly. Moors do not enslave Moors. It must be an outside race. The title of this article has to be written by a Moor. They've never been about Black unity, and they have their own individual or collective agendas as Moors. Them heading Black nationalism and consciousness today is intentionally deceptive. Now, this is the Freemason coat of arms associated with the United Grand Lodge of England. The United Grand Lodge of England, which dates back to June 1717, is the oldest Grand Lodge and is universally regarded as the Mother Grand Lodge of organized Freemasonry. In the Bible, the cherubim are described as winged beings often associated with God's presence, serving as guardians. However, what's been hidden is that the cherubim are actually Lucifer's workers, known as Luciferians. The picture before you depicts two cherubim, who are the fallen angels/demons, who came to earth from heaven, ruling over humanity today. What the power don't want us to know. Don't be mistaken by the skin color of these cherubim. It's an illusion of the truth. This is from the United Grand Lodges of England website. These are the foreign Grand Lodges in Africa. Now look at the location of these Freemason Grand Lodges. The vast majority are in West Africa and North Africa. Here are accusations about the Freemasons network that I found online. Theories suggest a connection to the Illuminati, the Knights Templar, and accusations of involvement with the occult. Claims of an international network pulling the strings of power and finance. Freemason is demonic. Worship of the devil. Satanic beliefs or practices. Freemasonry deals with the occult. That there is a centralized worldwide body that controls all Masonic Grand Lodges, and thus all of Freemasonry worldwide acts in a unified manner. Freemasonry is a Jewish front for world domination, or is at least controlled by Jews for this goal. Freemasons worship Baal, Baphomet, and Rahu. That Freemasonry is a cult in nature and worships their own particular god, such as the great architect of the universe, Gnosis or Jabalin, an amalgamation of the gods Yahweh, Baal, and Osiris. So now we see the world system has been run by Satanists. Babylonian witchcraft is how world powers have been able to maintain their power, wealth, and influence for generations. Yes, the cherubim are not benevolent, but actually angels of Lucifer. In the book of Enoch, it explains the fallen angels were 200 watchers that came to earth. The fallen angels were wicked, liars, corrupt, and masters at manipulation and deception. The book of Enoch was taken out of the Christian Bible. The Elohim, who are the Anunnaki, were a race of ancient extraterrestrial entities responsible for aiding humanity to build the first civilizations on earth. According to one source referencing biblical narrative, 200 Anunnaki fallen angels came from heaven to earth and landed in the Garden of Eden in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. It was in the days of Enoch's father that fallen angels impregnated human women and female animals and created different kinds of species on earth. The latest versions of the Christian Bible in circulation today have omitted a lot of books referencing the stories about the Anunnaki Elohim. So, in summary, the Afro-Asiatic people, black men and black women, are the fallen angels spoken about in the Bible. The Abrahamic religions are the religions of the fallen angels, hence why there is so much suffering and chaos in the world, with billions of people practicing these religions worldwide. Not all melanated beings are sourced from the Most High, what the world powers and creators of man-made religion don't want us to know. These groups have monopolized wealth globally, creating major wealth gaps between the elites and world citizens, keeping us in servitude to them for generations through their Luciferian witchcraft and science technology. Again, white people in power are either stand-ins for the black Moorish nobility or people of Moorish descent. These people were the original adversaries, the aboriginal melanated soul beings on earth, and collectively they still are. They have blended in with us and appropriated our culture. They stole from us and now retelling our stories back to us under the guise that they are the indigenous melanated people of earth. This is a spiritual war that has been up against us from these groups. Focusing solely on skin color as a determination of soul beings with a consciousness is a grave mistake. The spread of their Gnostic religion, Islam, worshiping Lucifer. This is from a document entitled What Were We Called Before 1492? Questions from the Zulu Nation. The author is bringing forth knowledge about America and Moorish history. I chose 2 questions to share on this slide and the next slide. Also, Amexem refers to North America, and it states, why do these specific Africans called Zulus, Dogons, Cometians, Egyptians claim Africa as their throne, but claim to come from space like Mars and Sirius A and B? The ancient natural peoples of Amexem, inclusive of Kemet, etc., are all of one family, expanded. Travel in the extraterrestrial planetary system is not new to Moors, nor is space travel a modern technological discipline. It is ancient amongst ancients. We are the owners and establishers of civilization on the Earth, storehouse of this solar system. Much of our knowledge and history was lost, but we were not always on the Earth. What are extraterrestrials, aliens, space creatures, and what do they have to do with human beings? Much that is considered extraterrestrial is actually not. All phenomenon and advanced things are just not exposed to the masses, nor admitted to by Inquisition rulers. Space travel is ancient, and interfacing with beings from other planets is also ancient to Moabites. We have never been alone nor static in this solar system, nor in this galaxy. Here's a summary of the Moors' reputation, a topic I've never heard discussed. Historically, they are known as savages who kill, conquer, and colonize lands for gold. They're slave capturers and traders. They did have mixed race unions with white women, and I stress this because of their deceptive white devil rhetoric with their pro-black imagery. They were into same-sex relationships. And I'm not saying this to shame those who engage in same-sex relationships, but making the point of the lie told, more than likely started by them, that the white man brought homosexuality to our black communities. The homosexuality of the Greeks and the Romans, these were them. There also were pedophiles. They are the initial Luciferians. They are warlocks who founded the Illuminati, Freemasons, Jesuits, KKK, and so on. They are the engineers of gene selection experiments. America's colonizers, and in history, the Moabites, who are the Moors, were cannibals who sacrificed children to their demonic god Shemosh, who is also Moloch. Today, you'll hear many Moors speaking out that they are America's indigenous, the real Native Americans. And there is a Moorish American movement happening to reclaim the land stolen by the government. What we are witnessing in government today, with Trump making a lot of cuts in the government, has all to do with the reestablishment of the Black Moorish monarchy. A king messiah from the Davidic line who will be the Jesus, quote unquote. This is not prophecy, but highly advanced orchestrated plans. Now recall the original black eagle bird of nobility is an emblem of Moorish or black nobility, which their crest proves they have never left power, ruling in the shadows. In this group, you have your foot soldiers, and then you have your generals, your admirals, and your elites. Here is a statement from the Olmec Nubian, and he states, quote, Noble Drew Ali gave the United States government a loan for about $25 million in gold, and is said to have received a mandate from the Pan American Conference for all of the lands of North, South, and Central America. This is a very important mandate that I would like to see for myself, and all of these lands are said to be held in a vast or express trust. If this is true, it's another cover-up of all of this land being returned back to the Moors. This is black nobility at its best. To take back the land of all the Americas and fund the bankrupt government on the land that you took. The true black nobleman of the hour. Can you handle the truth? End quote. Here is why everything I presented is important. The plans of worldwide governments, the Moors who rule in the shadows of all governments, along with their nefarious counterparts, the Anunnaki, these beings who are ushering in Armageddon, staging another reset as they did in the 1800s, with setting fires and mud floods of the kingdom of Tartaria. In this last reset under the de facto government, the Moors took on playing the role as the black people, victimized by colonization and chattel slavery, oppressed by the government who took their land and resources. And now where the last shall be the first, and the first shall be the last in these times. The role that the Moors are playing, pretending to be us with our stories, is a trick to those of us who are the indigenous melanated soul beings reincarnated back on Earth, all to sabotage and ultimately stop us from fulfilling our soul's mission, especially in these times, now that their time is up and Babylon is falling. These are the similar tricks they did to our ancestors, pretending to be our allies, all while undermining and scamming our people for generations. Here's a powerful quote I shared in a previous video, and it states, There are a lot of sorcerers masquerading as prophets. People are so enamored with the gift, they don't discern the spirit. The next 5 slides are the references used for this presentation. And as always, I encourage everyone to do their own independent research as to be set free from mental bondage. And as the saying goes, let the truth set you free. Here are the points I desire for people to take away from this presentation. First, all world governments are connected through Abrahamic religions. Second, most conflict between countries is orchestrated and not real, the illusion of separation. And this entire time in America, Muslims have been in power as the de jure government behind the scenes. Third, history has a lot of cover-ups, hidden agendas, and lies, so question your beliefs and what you've been taught. I suggest to learn new things to break the veil of generational indoctrination. 4. Satan and his people are of all races, skin tones, genders, and social status, so discernment is key, especially in these times. Satan's reign is coming to an end, so sinister energy is at an all-time high. Get to know a person's heart. Many people, including family and friends, are wearing masks. And lastly, the Antichrist will be a Moor, posing as a savior to melanated people from their white oppressors who will forcefully institute Islam as the one world religion. The bigger picture to all that's been said is the presence of spiritual warfare of good versus evil, which in essence is lower versus higher consciousness. This has been a continuous battle against the Most High God's people now and in previous generations. The extreme amount of suffering and chaos is because we have allowed Satan and his demons to reign on earth without collective pushback against corruption. The prophecies in the book of Revelation is happening now and is at its peak. This is why the truth is being exposed about the sinister agendas and activities of celebrities and government. Truths have to be revealed. What is done in the dark comes to light, and wicked people are losing their power. We are all witnessing the fall of Babylon. Spirituality has transitioned into a mainstream movement. Spirituality as a public movement is a psyops and headed by many soulless beings. Therefore, soul beings seeking true evolution use discernment. True spirituality is an intimate journey of self without many outside distractions. The fall of Babylon includes people at all levels who have benefited from the suffering of others, participated in chaos directly or indirectly, ones behind the scenes doing spell work on others, all active participants in this wicked system. The truth being revealed to us now is by the power of the Most High God for the destruction of Babylonian worldwide system. This is not only occurring on a global level, but a personal level as well, where the Most High God is revealing the heart of those around you. For those who seek to rise above the destruction to come, this is the time to go within and focus on yourself. Follow your intuition on the things you should be doing, on what the Most High God is calling you to do. Following your heart will lead you on a journey of reconnecting with yourself and discovering your purpose, which will lead to personal fulfillment as well as remembrance of why you incarnated on earth. The assignment you made with the Most High God to raise the consciousness on this planet. The journey of self can be isolating, but it all serves a higher purpose in the process, and the other side of this journey will be better than you imagined. We must remove the old to welcome in the new. Removing old conditioning, toxic people, materials, unhealthy environments, and so on, and over time being replaced with a healthier you, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Healthy relationships, stronger discernment, a better outlook on life, and doing the things that you enjoy. Life will never be perfect, but it will be more satisfying in experiencing the concept of heaven on earth. And know that everyone is not meant to go on this journey with you. Some people don't want to advance themselves, and that's their free will. Don't overextend yourself to people who choose not to heed warnings or learn new information. Even though you may love them, you can only control your outcome, no one else's. I know this from personal experience. It will only stress you out, so you must learn to detach. People are in our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, so know the difference. Detachment is not easy, but it is essential to keep your internal peace. Set boundaries and minimize your time around toxic people. My personal experience led me to realize there were many family and friends that never liked or loved me, and detaching from them was one of the best decisions I made. This system is failing as we speak, so right now is not a time to fear and panic, but listen to your higher self, and that's the God within you. Time to learn, be aware, and prepare for what's to come. And that's the chaos that comes with the destruction of an old system and the building of a new harmonious one. Don't wait until the last minute. Do a service to yourself and avoid the chaos. Thank you for watching Voice of Sankofa. And until my next video, peace and prosperity.